Hey everybody, it's Fox. Welcome back to my channel, and it is finally time for me to finish this SYLVIE breastplate over here. In the past few videos, I've walked you through patterning everything out of duct tape, transferring those patterns onto some foam, and creating our base and secondary layers. And the last time I left you, I was showing you how to wrap all of those pieces in some stretch vinyl fabric. From there, I decided to take all of those 2mm pieces and top stitch all of them using my sewing machine to give them a more finished look. 2mm foam is pretty thin, so I didn't have much of an issue running these pieces through my machine, though one thing to note is that it will gum up your needles pretty quickly because of the contact cement that we use to glue all of that fabric on. So I ended up having to use 2 needles to get everything sewn down, but in the end it was worth it to me, and needles aren't really all that expensive. Now, top stitching all of these pieces is not technically screen accurate to the piece that's used in the show, but you know what? I don't care. There's some times that I just do stuff in cosplay and I do it because I want to. And you're gonna find out a lot as this video goes on that I am taking a lot of creative liberties. And that is the best part about cosplay, in my opinion. We can take these things from shows that we really like and we can kind of create our own little spin on it. Once I had all of my pieces top stitched, I went in with some olive green leather paint and painted all of the pieces. SYLVIE's breastplate is actually black, so you could skip this step entirely if you really wanted to, but like I said, I wanted to make my piece green for a few reasons. One, it's green, and I kind of love the color green, so anytime I have an excuse to make something green, I'm gonna take it. 2, the way that the Loki show is lit, her breastplate often reads green in the show. And honestly, I really like the look of it. And last, while the majority of SYLVIE's cosplay is black in the show, I knew that whenever I would take it to conventions that it may not read very well in certain types of light. So I thought adding in a little bit more green accents and some kind of like texture here and there would help a lot in like low light situations and not optimal kind of like photography, you know, all the light kind of situation. Again, it was a creative liberty that I went with, and you can choose to do it or you can choose not to do it. It's totally up to you. It's your costume. It took about 3 layers of this paint to get a consistent look with no brush strokes. I also did this after the top stitching was done so that I could also paint the thread instead of having to match that thread to my green paint. While I painted the other flaps, I took the circular necklace piece, which was the only piece that I did not top stitch, and painted it with some of my Vallejo polished gold. Now, this is not the best paint to use with painting on fabric, but I knew that I wanted it to flake off in the end and kind of look a little bit weathered, so I really didn't mind that it would end up doing that. I also gave this piece about 2 to 3 coats of paint. While all of my pieces were drying, I went out into my garage with my base foam piece and gave that 2 layers of Plasti-Dip. This was all of the paintwork that I ended up doing on this piece because you won't see a lot of this base once everything is done and attached to it, and if you do, it's going to be black anyways. Also, one thing I forgot to mention about this base piece is the attachment on the back. I want this chest piece to be semi-fitted to my body, so I ended up using a zipper on the back to get it on and off. It's just attached with 3 layers of contact cement and it hasn't budged once. Now that all of my pieces are dry, it was time to do one last mock-up to make sure all of the pieces fit as they should, and then it was time to glue all of the pieces on. I'm gonna be real with you guys here. This was the most annoying part of the entire process, and it was also the most painful because I did this in a very bad position of crouching on my floor for 4 hours, so learn from my mistakes. The whole process to get everything on was essentially me taking some contact cement, painting it onto my base piece, and then also painting a layer of that onto all of my little flat pieces and gluing it on. However, I stupidly painted on an entire layer of contact cement to the entire base piece. I'm talking the front and the back, and I thought that I was being smart and going to save some time by not having to wait for contact cement dry all the time, but it almost kind of worked too well. Whenever I went to glue the back pieces on,
Fuck. God damn it.
That back piece fused to the front of the chest piece and ended up ripping up a bunch of the foam backing from that back piece. Thankfully, I was able to salvage both that back piece and the front by just cutting away the foam with a box cutter and dremeling it down. But if I could give you one piece of advice for this step, it would be to just contact cement the section you're working on and continue going from there. Like in my previous video detailing how to use contact cement, I would paint on a layer of cement to the base piece and then the piece that would be covering it. Let that layer cure for about 15 minutes and then paint on a second while letting that cure for 15 minutes as well. Once those 2 pieces were tacky, I would then place all my pieces onto the base as such and kind of just keep on going from there until everything was on. Like I said earlier, gluing all these pieces on ended up taking about 4 hours, and I was crouched over everything in my garage because I didn't really have a good way to do it and I didn't want to be using all this contact cement inside. And Yeah, so just be patient. It's going to take you a while, and I also recommend maybe trying to figure out a way so that you're like sitting in a chair and you're not bending over and just like absolutely making your back want to kill you by the end of the day. I created the straps the same way I created the second layer of flaps by taking some 2mm foam and wrapping it in the same ultra premium fabric as before using some contact cement. I top stitched all of these as well and painted the sides with the same olive green paint as all of the other flaps. I wanted the middle to remain black, and I admittedly did all of this backwards. I should have taped off the middle section of the straps and just painted the olive green down. Instead, I painted the entire piece green and went back in to paint the black on with this Plaid FX black paint, which again is not meant for leather or fabrics like this. Because of that choice, when I tore up the painter's tape, it kind of ripped away at the paint and ended up showing the original fabric below, but it was kind of a happy accident in a way because I kind of liked it. It looked a bit weathered, so I decided to keep it as is. If you don't like the look of this, I would definitely recommend actually getting a black leather paint or just actually taping things in reverse like I had mentioned before. As for attaching the straps, I just cut slits into the front and back of the chest piece and fed the straps through. I then glued the excess foam onto the inside of the piece and super glued it so that it wouldn't move around. The back straps were attached in a similar fashion, and now it was finally move on to all of those little details. On the top of Sylvie's chest piece, there are 4 of these little gold spacer things, and on the right there are these little gold boxes, so instead of torturing myself and making these out of foam, which you totally can do, you can make these little bits out of foam, but I just know myself and I absolutely hate making little things out of foam. I ran out to Joann's to pick up these flat bead spacers and some rhinestones to repaint. The flat spacers were the perfect color already, so I just went ahead and glued those onto the piece with super glue. As for the rhinestones, well, I found out when I got home that they weren't exactly long enough for what I needed, but I just ended up doubling them up and figured they'd look just as fine. I took out 24 pieces and stuck them all onto a piece of 2mm foam with some painter's tape rolled up to keep them secure, and gave them a coat of automotive primer, then a coat of black spray paint, and finally hand painted them with that same Vallejo's polished gold. Once everything was dry, I carefully stuck these onto my piece with super glue, but I would recommend that you go with something like E6000 here. I think that my bits will be fine, but as I was gluing, I thought using a stronger glue might be beneficial here in the end. While I was gluing everything onto the right side of the chest, I carefully brushed on some lime green paint onto the left side. I was so excited to add this color, you have no idea. The paint I'm using isn't the best to use over this fabric, but since it was already primed, so to speak, with that olive green leather paint, it ended up working out okay. It took around 3 layers of paint to get an even coat here, so just again, make sure that you're being patient. One of the last little details I needed to add were the zipper stops to the strap. Yes, you heard that right, zipper stops. I bought a bag of gold zipper stops from a zipper supplier, which for whatever reason kind of blew my mind that that is a business that exists. And to add these on, all you need to do is grab a pair of pliers and squeeze where you want them to be, and then they're secured. There's no glue required, and I added these all over the straps in varying patterns, trying to stick to the photos, but also not caring if I did it. The last little details included painting on some gold scratches to the front of the chest piece with my Vallejo paint again, and then going in with some 120 grit sandpaper to scuff things up and give it a more weathered feel. I might decide to airbrush in some shadows later, but for now, I'm happy with how everything looks. And after about a week of work, I am finally finished with this chest piece. It was a lot of fun to dive back into foam work for this build, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. The only thing I'm not happy about is that now I actually have to start doing all the sewing parts of this costume, and I can no longer put it off by saying that I have to work on the foam bits. So yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching and for sticking with me in this build, and I hope that you're learning a lot, and if you are making a Sylvie, then definitely make sure to let me know down below and how it's going, and if you have any other questions. And just as a reminder, I did want to let you guys know that I upload every Monday and Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so just make sure that you are subscribed so that you don't miss my next video, and I will catch you guys next time. Bye! I could be 100% wrong whenever I watch this footage back, but I don't think that I had a blooper at all filming that, which was kind of amazing, so